A very good evening. Welcome to the webinar on Lead the Race with an Analytics Career, being organized by Analytics India magazine. Today we have with us Sarita Digumarti, who is the CEO of Jigsaw Academy. She has spent over 15 years working as a data scientist and helping clients across diverse sectors, including retail, healthcare, and financial services, and is ranked among the top data scientists in the country. Today, she will be presenting us on this webinar for half an hour, and this will be followed by a question and answers session. If you have any questions which you would like to share with us, please type all your questions on the panel towards your right. We hope you have an informative session today. Hi, Sarita. You can take over the session.
Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me. Good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to, as Teja said, I'm basically going to spend about 30 minutes or so talking about careers in analytics and data science, and then open it up for questions. While I'm on the presentation, I may not answer any questions, but I will review all questions that you have once the presentation is done. Yeah. So let me just get started. So I've been introduced, so I'm not going to spend too much time. Just to give you a little background in terms of my educational qualifications, I have a business degree and I have a master's degree in economics and econometrics. I worked in analytics primarily for over 15 years. My domain areas have been retail and healthcare, though I also have experience with financial services and so on. Right? So broadly speaking, this is the agenda. I'm going to talk about what exactly is analytics. A lot of us have heard about analytics, data science, data mining, business intelligence, but what exactly is it? What does it involve? Why is this an interesting career choice and something that everyone should be looking at? Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the skill sets that are required for analytics and data science related jobs. What are the different career paths and job roles in analytics and data science? And then finally, I'm happy to open it up for questions. Okay. So let's start with what is analytics. And in fact, maybe I can just ask some of you that question. You can chat and type this for me. But what do you think is analytics? Just make sure when you're typing that you're writing it to the entire audience. But anybody wants to give me an answer? Most of us have heard of analytics, but what exactly is it? Anyone wants to take a shot at it? Just make sure you're typing it to the full audience and not just to me. So make sure when you're sending the chat that you say send chat to entire audience. Anyone wants to take a shot at it? What exactly is analytics? So Guru Prasad says analytics is something which helps in making decisions. Okay? Okay? Anybody else? Something that helps in making decisions. Okay? Anyone else wants to tell me what exactly is analytics? Humongous data being processed in minutes. So Sudhindra is saying humongous data being processed in minutes. By the way, you're all writing to me privately. Please choose the option says all entire audience, send chat to. When you're sending the chat, below that there is a button and you can check. So send it to the entire audience so everyone can see this. Dhairya is saying analyzing data sets is analytics. Okay. So anyone else before I continue, anyone else wants to try? What exactly is analytics? Getting better insight of data. Gaurav Sinha says getting better insight of data and predicting on top of it to make better decisions. Okay, so there are, clearly a lot of different, understanding of analytics. So most of you are right. It is a way of making decisions. It is a way of making sense of data. It is a way of making faster and smarter decisions, right? But how is that different from data analysis? What exactly is the big difference between data analysis and analytics? Data analysis is also the ability to make sense of data, the ability to analyze lots and lots of data. But there is a big difference between data analysis and analytics, and there is a big reason why there is so much hype in analytics per se. And that has to do with what the end outcome of analytics is supposed to be. So if you look at the traditional definition of analytics, right? Analytics is the ability to analyze historical data with the intention of making reasonably confident predictions about the future, right? So let me just say that again. If you look at the traditional definition of analytics, analytics really is the ability to analyze data, to analyze historical data, and make reasonably confident predictions about the future, right? Because most companies are already, have already always been doing data analysis. But data analysis tells us what has happened, right? Data analysis tells us this is what it has happened, maybe this is why it has happened. But companies want to be able to take a step forward and say, okay, based on what has happened, can I figure out what will happen, right? Can I figure out what is going to happen? Therefore, for me to be able to make these decisions on a faster, smarter basis, I need to have a better reading of what I think is going to happen in the future. And that is the whole idea of analytics, the ability of not just analyzing data, but analyzing data to help data drive decisions for the future, right? Is everyone with me? So I'm going to give you an example of analytics, and I'm going to start with Netflix, right? Does everyone know of Netflix? Yeah, does everyone know of Netflix? Familiar with what Netflix does? Yeah, at least some of you hopefully know what Netflix does. Now, Netflix is a very interesting example of the usage of analytics, because what Netflix has done is that, it started off by being basically like your video provider, right? So what was Netflix originally? You decided what movies you wanted to watch, and you would get the DVDs by post, right? By your regular post. So it would show up in your mailbox. You would play the DVD, you finish watching the movie, and then you would mail it back to Netflix, right? So that's sort of how it started. But then over time, it has moved from being a distributor of content, right, to a maker of content, to a content creator. Now, this is a very huge transformation, right? And how have they been able to get from somebody who just distributes content to somebody who makes content? This has happened on the basis of analytics. Why is that? Because Netflix already has data on what kind of shows, movies or TV shows that their users like to watch, right? They can tell what shows are popular, what are not. In the shows that are popular, who are the actors in those shows? What is the type of that show? Is it a horror show? Is it a political drama? Is it comedy, etc.? So they have a lot of data that they can use to look at what kind of shows, what kind of movies, what kind of content is popular among its users, right? And understanding that gives them the ability to then create content, right? The ability to build this content based on what they think is popular. So for example, the House of Cards show, which was one of their breakout hits, right, for Netflix to create this, they essentially looked at all their data and they said, political dramas are very popular, Kevin Spacey is popular, this director is very popular. So if we build a show around the 4 or 5 things that we know that our customers really like, then there is a very, very good chance that we will end up with a hit, right? So the reason the Netflix example is so powerful is that most of us understand that companies use data to make smarter decisions, to make better decisions. We understand that, a lot of companies use data to drive their decision making. But it's beyond just using data to, to do tactical stuff, right? The Netflix example is something which is very, very different. It was a transformative example of a company that was able to use analytics as a way to completely transform itself from somebody who was simply a distributor of content to someone who is now making content, who is creating content, who is driving, a lot of the content creation itself based on its completely solid understanding of the data that it had on consumer viewing preferences, right? And that is why it is very important to get a good understanding of analytics. It is not just another way of data analysis. It is not just another tool in decision making. It has the potential to completely transformatively change, the ways companies operate, the growth path that they're on, the way that they will survive, in fact, in the future. Now, in analytics per se, there are many terms, right? And I'm sure all of you have heard very, very different terminology used in analytics, right? So analytics is one term. Data science is another term, machine learning, predictive modeling, big data, data warehousing, data mining. There are so many terms in analytics. So what exactly is each of these things, and what is analytics? Are these different? Etc. So I want to just quickly spend a little bit of time talking about the terminology used, because sometimes it gets very confusing when different people use different terms to possibly talk about the same thing, right? The idea of using data for understanding what is happening is broadly the field of data mining, right? The ability to look at data, to sort of understand what's in the data, to get an understanding of what is happening with my company, with my consumers, with my transactions, etc., is essentially data mining, right? So anytime you're dealing with data and you're trying to find something from the data, that is data mining, right? Most companies typically perform data mining with the intention of doing historical data analysis, which is essentially business intelligence or reporting. Business intelligence and reporting is essentially the ability of a company to understand what has happened and what is currently happening, right? So what is happening to my sales, what is happening to my consumers, who are, what is my growth rate like, which are my popular locations for sales. If I'm an e-commerce company, what are my popular categories, what campaigns are working. If I'm a financial services company, which of my financial services products are popular, what is my risk on the portfolio currently, what has been the risk in the past, what has been the trends of risk in the past. So this is essentially what most companies do when they do data mining, right? They are essentially looking at historical data to understand what has happened and what is happening. And this is typically what is considered as reporting and business intelligence, right? If you want to move, like I said, from understanding what has happened and what is happening to try and figure out what is going to happen possibly in the future, then you are moving into the field of predictive modeling or predictive analytics, right? Which is essentially, given historical data, given past trends, can I make a reasonably educated, confident guess about what is going to happen in the future? In other words, if these are my sales in the last 3 quarters, what do I expect my sales to be in the next quarter, right? If I'm running an inventory management system, how do I know, what should be my replenishment rate for next quarter? What products do I need to order in what quantity? Because this is how I anticipate my sales are going to happen. If I'm in financial services, what is the probability that, what is the proportion of customers that may possibly default on my loans, right? What is the proportion of, how many new consumers am I going to have who may apply for home loans, right? Things like that. This is where you start moving from what has happened, what is happening, to what will happen. So typically, remember, business intelligence reporting is historical data analysis to understand what has happened, what is happening. Predictive modeling and analytics typically is used in the view where you want to get to what will happen, right? So that's broadly the division. Then, of course, there is machine learning, there is big data, there's artificial intelligence, there's data science. Now, data science and analytics are terms that are used somewhat interchangeably in the industry, though data science typically does require more programming experience and more statistical experience, say analytics, right? Machine learning refers to a class of algorithms within predictive modeling that are less concerned about statistics and more concerned about allowing the algorithm to learn by itself based on the data that you're feeding into it. So typically, when you use predictive modeling, there are 2 approaches. You can do statistical approaches or you can do machine learning approaches. In statistical approaches, typically you will have to worry about distribution of data, some assumptions of the data behavior, etc., in order for you to make those predictions that you want. In machine learning, typically you will not so much worry about the data distribution or the explainability of the model. You are primarily thinking about accuracy and predictability. You don't worry so much about explainability, right? Then there is big data. And big data is another term that has generated a lot of interest, a lot of buzz. A lot of people now talk about all analytics is big data analytics. But primarily, what is big data? Big data refers to the ability of companies to process very, very large volumes of data, right? So how large do you think is big data? What do you think will qualify if I tell you that, okay, this is a big data problem versus a small data problem? What do you think qualifies for big data? Is it just size? Anyone have any ideas? What is big data? How is that different from regular data? Anyone wants to respond? What is big data? Okay, I see some answers. So Daria is saying velocity. Okay, so it's not just size, it's also velocity. And what is velocity? It's essentially the rate at which data is being generated, right? Guru Prasad says big data more than 1 TB. Okay, maybe more than 1 TB is big data. Daria is saying like Google searches, unstructured data. So you're right. So big data, when we talk about big data, one aspect of big data is size. Now remember, there is no one measure of size for something to qualify as big data, because to some extent it depends on what the company is used to before, right? What is big data for Google may not be big data for, let's say Jigsaw Academy, right? So there's very different understanding of what is size. But essentially, when you start dealing with data that is being generated at a high speed, when you're dealing with data that is of very, very different types, and when I say types, I mean unstructured data. So most of us, when we talk about data, think about transactional data in databases, right? Rows and columns of data, numbers, or qualitative data, but still something that can be quantified, right? But many times nowadays we are dealing with data that is not really numeric, right? It is not structured in the sense that it can't be put into row columns of data. What could be examples of that? Supposing I go to Facebook and I like a post, right? Now that is data, but how do I actually capture the like in a data, right? In a transactional database. So supposing I go to Zomato and I've gone to a restaurant and I hated it and I give it a bad review. Now that is data, but again, it is not data in the way that we are used to thinking about data, or X-ray images or MRIs, for example, photos of vacation, videos that we upload. All of this is data. But unfortunately, traditional database systems are not equipped to deal with this kind of data. So when you are dealing with very, very large volumes of data that is being generated at a very, very high speed, so if data is just coming at you constantly at an increasing rate of velocity, and you're dealing with very, very different types of data, essentially what happens is that traditional database management systems are not created, equipped to manage all of this kind of data. And even if you want to process the data, if you try to do sequential processing, you are eventually going to end up taking too much time for it to be useful, right? So the whole idea of big data is to figure out a way where you can essentially distribute the processing. You do parallel processing across multiple machines, so that when you query a database, right, that you're not waiting for 3 hours to get an answer, because nobody now can afford to wait for that long to get answers. So this idea of big data is really about processing, storing, managing very, very large volumes of data, of unstructured and semi-structured and structured data that is arriving at a very, very high speed. But big data per se is not analytics, right? Big data is still storage, managing, processing, right? Eventually, the usefulness of big data is in its ability to provide data for analysis, right? So eventually the value from an analytics perspective, you have to perform analytics on big data systems. So big data per se is not analytics, but big data is an enabler of analytics, right? So that's broadly, the most popular terms: business intelligence, reporting, data mining, predictive modeling, machine learning, big data, and data science, right? And if there are other terms that you want me to explain, I'd be happy to do so either now or when we get to the Q&A, right? But now let me just quickly talk about why analytics, right? And most of you are here because you've heard about analytics. You're reading a lot about analytics. Everybody is talking about analytics. It's been called the sexiest job of the 21st century. It's been called the job with the hottest prospects. Everyone's talking about how there will be massive, shortage of trained people, both in India and globally, right? And why is that? Why is everyone talking about it? And in fact, if you read this LinkedIn article, and they have published an update to this already, that across 30 different countries in the world, based on the jobs that were posted and the skills that were required, based on LinkedIn job posts, across 30 different countries in the world in 2016, statistical analysis and data mining was either number 1 or number 2 in each of those countries, right? And this is true also for 2017. LinkedIn has also published an update about it, right? And there is clearly a lot of interest and need for trained resources, which is reflected in the value that companies are willing to pay for trained data science resources. But what do you think is the reason for this popularity? Do you think it's all hype? Do you think there is just a lot of buzz? This is the next new thing. It's like SAP. Everyone talked about SAP. Now everyone's talking about analytics. What do you think is the reason for this interest? How much of it is hype? Anyone? Why do you think there is everyone's talking about analytics? Is this valid? Is this substantiated? Is there, is this just driven by hype? Anyone? I don't see any answers. I'm just waiting to see if anyone wants to take a guess. Why do you think there is just so much interest in analytics? Okay, I see one answer. Daria is saying, you tell us, guide us with the truth. But anyone, what do you think? You think this is all hype or based on something? Sudhindra is saying, data with company reveals the pattern. See, there are a couple of very simple reasons for why analytics is so popular and everybody is talking about it. Because at the end of the day, right, what is analytics? It is the ability to use data to help businesses take smarter, more strategic decisions to make predictions about the future, right? Now, can you think of any industry that does not, or any company that does not generate data? Can you think of any company that says that I don't need to use data in any of my decision making? It is not, analytics is not a field that is industry specific or sector specific, right? It doesn't matter whether this is a telecom company, an e-commerce company, a bank, a financial services company, a travel and leisure company, a healthcare company, a pharmaceutical company, a non-government, politics, government agency, doesn't matter, right? Can you think of any situation or any company or any industry where they can afford to say that I don't need to look at data? Absolutely not, right? Every company cannot, no company in this world can say that I'm going to make all my decisions, based on gut feel, based on, what the CEO says. At some point, all companies are generating data and they have to use it as a strategic resource. And increasingly, given how much data is being captured by every company, increasingly given how much data is being stored by every company, right? Every company needs people who can make sense of this data. Okay, Sudhindra is asking me, defense, do they need data? Anyone wants to take a stab at it? Do you think defense companies need data? Absolutely. I can tell you that we've been approached by multiple defense companies who need to train their resources on analytics, because it's not like, a lot. When you say defense companies, right, there are many things within a defense companies. There is an operations process, right? There is a manufacturing process. There is an inventory process. And all of these do need analytics, right? It's not that, there is any company in the world that you can think of that says, absolutely, I don't need analytics. And that brings me to my other point, right? It's not just industry focus, it's also functional area, right? Now, irrespective of what sort of functional area you are in, let's say as part of a company, right? You could be in finance, you could be in marketing, you could be in operations, you could be in supply chain, right? It could be anything, you could be in HR, right? Again, increasingly, everybody is dealing with more and more data, right? Earlier, there was this idea that, okay, some functions, they were not really that data driven. But now if you look at marketing decisions, you look at finance decisions, you look at even HR decisions, right? A lot of it is being driven by data, right? So there is a very, very solid reason why there is so much interest in analytics, is because we are all in a very, very connected data driven world, and that is only increasing. Would you agree with me? The data that we are generating, the data that we are capturing, the data that we will be able to capture, that is only going to increase, right? We are living in a world that needs more and more personalization at the level of consumers. Most of us don't want a general solution. We want personalized solutions. Thus, personalized solutions is going to come on the basis of data, right? Irrespective of what functional area you're in, what domain you're in, you are eventually going to have to deal with data. And therefore, there is a significant and long-standing sustainable need for people with data analytics skills. Now, does it mean that everybody needs the same level of data analytics skills? No. And we will talk about roles and different roles and different skill sets required in analytics. But fundamentally, is there a need for people to have excellent data manipulation, data processing, data analysis, and data analytics skills? Absolutely. None of us, it doesn't matter what sort of a role we're in, can really escape the idea that we don't have to deal with data. All of us will have to start. Broadly speaking, there are two sets of skills that you should think about. One is what I will call inherent skills, the specific skills based on your personality, based on your interests, right? And then there is another set of skills, which is essentially technical skills that can be learned. So let's start with inherent skills, right? Now, analytics is essentially data-driven decision making, right? In that sense, you have to be comfortable with numbers because a lot of data is eventually numbers or can be converted into numbers. So you have to be comfortable with numbers. You have to not be afraid of numbers. You have to have reasonably strong quantitative skills. If you are the kind of person who says numbers scare me, then maybe analytics is not something that you should look at. Two, you should have a logical approach to problem solving, right? You should have a logical and analytical mind. And why is that? Because again, at the end of the day, this is problem solving with numbers, right? So you have to be able to apply logical frameworks, logical steps, problem solving approaches to numbers to help help businesses come up with the answers they need. And finally, you should have a high sense of curiosity. With problem solving, typically, you cannot give up till you find the answer. And usually the answer is not immediately available to you, right? So you have to have a high sense of curiosity. You cannot give up. You have to keep asking the questions. You have to keep looking at the problem till you feel like you have the answer, right? So these are essentially what I'm calling inherent skills, right? This is things that you should be comfortable with. Over and above that, obviously, you need to pick up some technical skills. And what are the technical skills that you need to learn? A lot of analytics and analytics algorithms when it comes to predictive modeling is based on statistics. So you have to have a good understanding of statistics, descriptive inferential statistics, and how they apply to business data. Right? Two, you should have the knowledge of the analytics methodology, which is, what is the framework that you're going to apply in terms of solving problems for businesses with data. There is a standard process that most companies, most people will apply. So you should have a good understanding of what that methodology is, what are the stages in that methodology, what is the outcomes at each stage, and so on, right? Three, you should have knowledge of predictive modeling and machine learning algorithms because those at the end of the day are what you will be able to apply to come up with answers about the future. So things like regression models, or decision tree models, random forest, segmentation models, etc. You should have a good understanding of those. Finally, you should have significant expertise in some analytics tools. A lot of analysis and some analytics can be done with Excel, but Excel was not built to be a statistical, analytics tool. It was built to be a data management, data processing tool. You will need knowledge of tools like, R or SAS or Python, etc., which were essentially built to enable these algorithms to be applied to large volumes of business data. So you will need understanding of analytics tools to be able to do this. Right? So now let me talk very briefly about career paths and roles in analytics. Remember, analytics is a wide field, and like I said, there are many terms, many terminologies that are used, and many different outcomes of analytics. Historical analysis, reporting, business intelligence, big data analytics, machine learning, data science, etc. But broadly speaking, a data scientist or an analytics professional is expected to have, three very distinctive skills. Right? One, the ability to essentially apply mathematics and statistics knowledge to business data. So math stats knowledge is very, very important. Second, some programming knowledge, because at the end of the day, if you are dealing with very, very large volumes of data and you want to be able to apply algorithms to that data, you have to be able to comfortable doing data manipulation, data processing, model building using programming tools. So whether you're learning R or SAS, typically some amount of programming is involved. A lot of pre-processing happens using SQL, for example, and other tools. So you have to be comfortable with programming and some amount of technology. And third, you should have an understanding of domain. Because remember, at the end of the day, data scientists or analytics professionals help businesses solve very specific problems using data. So in order to help solve that problem, you do need to have business knowledge. You need to have domain knowledge. So roughly speaking, a data scientist, and that's why they're called unicorns, right, is someone who has three very distinctive skills and has high levels of expertise in all of these: programming and technology, domain knowledge, and math statistics. Now, obviously, not all of us can become experts in all three things, right? And therefore, over time, the role has evolved. So, for example, if you are more, if you're a lot more comfortable on the programming side to understand some amount of maths and statistics, then maybe you should look at what is called a data engineering role, where your primary focus will be in managing the data, in making sure that the data is ready for analytics processing. If on the other hand, you're not that comfortable with programming and technology and you want to focus on domain, right? You have domain knowledge, you have some understanding of statistics, then maybe you want to look at becoming a data analyst, where you are not necessarily doing a lot of programming and heavy duty programming, but you are working with data and you are trying to analyze the data to come up with insights. On the other hand, you are not that interested in the math statistics and you have, say, a combination of programming and domain, and typically this is the standard IT business analyst role, which is acting as an interface between the technical team and the functional team, right? And that's also a role within analytics. If you have high levels of expertise in all three, then you possibly can become a data scientist. But of course, that's only a small factor. There are many other roles within data science. As companies hire more and more people, as companies invest more in analytics, they are building very, very specialized roles within the field of data mining and analytics. So for example, data visualization experts. And this is something that's becoming increasingly important, because at the end of the day, your analysis or the analytics you perform is only as good as your ability to present that analysis, the story that you're telling with the data. So there is a huge interest in people who can build stories from data, who can visualize data, who can make sense of the analytics generated insights in a way that a business audience can understand. So a data visualization role is becoming increasingly popular. Also a big data role, a big data specialist role, somebody who understands big data technology, who understands how parallel processing works, who can essentially work with the data on big data systems, know how to store the data, know how to query the data, and eventually also know how to analyze data on big data systems. Then there are machine learning specialists, which are essentially, if you work for e-commerce companies, for example, or more newer age startups where you're dealing with very, very large volumes of data and real-time results are more important than explainable models, then you will start using more advanced predictive algorithms or machine learning algorithms. So then you become a machine learning specialist. So what I want to tell you is that there are many roles within analytics, and so when you are looking at careers in analytics, and if you're thinking about it, a lot of it will depend on what your key skills are, what your interest is, and what your long-term career goals are. There is not one role in analytics. There are many roles within analytics, right? And so depending on what your prior experience is, depending on what your interest area is, you should be able to map to, this is the kind of role that eventually I want to go to. If I come from a very heavy IT background, I have a lot of programming experience, then maybe you should look at data engineering roles or big data roles where a lot of emphasis is placed on technology understanding and programming skills. If you come from the business side or functional side, I work in marketing, I work in sales, I work in finance, and you should look at business analyst or data analyst roles where you are more using your domain knowledge and statistical knowledge to be able to come up with useful, insightful analysis for your company. So again, depending on what your strengths are, what your interests are, what your past experience has been, there could be different role profiles within analytics, right? So that's really what I wanted to talk about careers in analytics. But I'm happy to answer questions, very specific questions about your career or what you should be looking at, or any questions generally about analytics, big data, any terminology, anything at all, I'm happy to answer. So I'm just going to go through, I can see some questions here, so I'm just going to go through them. Just give me a little bit of time because I want to make sure that I go through all these questions. Okay, I'm just trying to make sure that I can see the questions. Okay, so okay, Dhairya is asking me, what should I opt for after class 12 to have a career in data science? What course degree should I opt for after class 12? If you're interested in data science, remember, there is a fairly heavy emphasis on statistics, on mathematics, and on programming. So my recommendation would be make sure that you do something that has some math in it. So it could be statistics, it could be economics, anything like that. They're all very useful. Also engineering degrees, because typically companies do consider people with engineering degrees to have quantitative skills, to have the mathematical ability and programming skills. Lots of companies also hire people with BCom, this bachelor's of computer application sort of degrees as well. Just make sure that whatever course you choose, that there is a some quantitative component, and whether or not in the course or externally that you're learning some programming, right? Okay, so let's see. What are the, okay, Ashish Agarwal is asking, what is the mandatory skill set predictive modeling, statistical modeling, data mining, machine learning, and tools to be part of data scientist fraternity. Can a professional with around 1 year of experience as a data analyst with a break of about 3 years have a chance to be part of the industry again in the field of analytics? So I think the fact that you have a data analyst experience is useful. Now, because there's been a break, obviously, when you want to re-enter the job market, you do need to make sure that you have a very compelling skill set. And typically for most companies, right, they may have very specific requirements, but they do like people who have multiple skill sets. So, you know, because of your break, I would recommend that you need to have a very, very strong resume to make you very attractive to companies, right? So I would definitely say, you know, focus on predictive modeling, machine learning. So at least 2 of R, SAS, or Python. Maybe some data visualization tools as well. If you can, if you can include some Tableau, if you can include some ClickView, etc., those will all be useful. So NV Anand says, what are typical kind of roles where project management, operations, and analytics are used together? So typically, this will happen at more senior roles, right? So if you work for analytics services delivery companies, right? If, for example, Tenpack or New Sigma, etc. As you grow in your career, you are going to start doing some amount of project management, some amount of operations, but you will also need to have an understanding of analytics and be able to build, manage teams that do analytics. Other than that, at senior levels, there are specialized roles that require some knowledge of analytics and some knowledge of operations. So, for example, somebody who is in the marketing team and who is, very senior in marketing will be expected to have all of these 3 skill sets, right? If you're in operations or you're in marketing, you are responsible for growth, you're responsible for strategy, then you will be expected to have all of these skill sets at the same time, right? Okay. So let me just make sure that I'm answering questions. Rahul Nair says, can you please tell me what is the difference between data scientist and data engineering? So like I said, data scientist is typically somebody who's expected to have multiple roles. At the very minimum, strong programming expertise, strong statistics and mathematics knowledge, and strong business knowledge. Now, those can be picked up, but typically they will need experience. So you will pick them up slowly over time based on your domain knowledge, based on your growth path. Data engineering roles are essentially where technology plays a larger role. So it's still something to do with data. You will still be expected to understand, some amount of math statistics, because you are essentially making the data ready for analytics teams. So you need to have a better understanding of how, what the analytics teams want to do, how they want to use it, and typically data engineering roles will be part of analytics roles. But your focus is a little bit more on technology, a little bit more on data management and making it ready for model building, rather than necessarily interpretation of results, for which you need a lot of business domain experience. What is the level of programming required? Okay, somebody asked me this question. I don't have your name, I'm sorry. Typically for data engineering, data science roles, level of programming required is fairly high. The good news is a lot of statistical tools, like say for example SAS or R, the programming is relatively easy to pick up. It's not that difficult. It's not as complex as some other programming languages. There are a lot of inbuilt functions, etc. So you will be able to use it. If you are familiar with SQL, for example, lots of these tools will allow you to use SQL within that. For example, SAS will allow you to use SQL code within SAS to manipulate data. But you do need to have reasonably strong levels of programming language skills. You have to develop that, meaning even if you don't know it, you will have to learn it. But the good news is that for some of these statistical tools, the programming itself is not that difficult. Okay, Meghnad says, what about a person who is in digital marketing with no programming language but hungry towards learning data analysis? So if you're thinking about digital marketing, you have digital marketing experience, and I would look at more data analyst roles where you are essentially part of a marketing team doing marketing analytics. And many times with digital analytics, you may not necessarily need to learn to use programming. But if you're serious about a data role in the long run, you will have to learn some programming. I know that a lot of people worry about programming skills and learning programming. But I want to assure you that A, it is just, it's a matter of practice, and B, a lot of these tools do make programming very easy. So, it's simply a matter of getting used to it. Once you start doing it, then, it is going to be very, very easy for you to continue. Remember, programming nowadays is a life skill, right? All of us need to learn some amount of programming. Maybe we don't need lots and lots of programming, but in general, it's something that you should pick up. Nada says, do the roles related in data analysis field include creation of dashboards and automation of creating them? Yes, yes, absolutely. And that's why I talked about data visualization roles and analytics application developer roles also exist. So lots of times, you have to have the ability to take the end output of an analytics project and build a front end app, right, or an application for a business user to use. So the results have to be automated. The results have to be dynamically presented. Something for a user to be able to interact with this, with the output and sort of decide how he wants to implement this, or what inputs he needs for their decision making. So those roles will also be included. Sometimes there will be specific data visualization or developer roles, and sometimes they will be part of a data scientist role expectations that you should also be able to visualize data. You should also be able to use, for example, Visual Basic to build applications. Right? NV Anand says, retired from armed forces after 20 years of service. I'm a general business management graduate, also PMP. What are the kind of roles that will be suitable for me? See, with 20 years of experience, I would not recommend doing, like a hands-on data engineering or a data science role. I think you should look at the, you should look at gaining an understanding of how analytics can add value to companies or to roles given your leadership level. And then you should be able to use that understanding to figure out where analytics can be used within your company. So it's almost like, you need to have an understanding of analytics from a leadership perspective. I don't think it makes sense for you to start building skill sets at a hands-on level in terms of building models, because you already have clearly lots of experience already in something very different. But I would urge you to sort of really understand what are the different types of analytics, the way that analytics is used, what are some examples, so that you have a good understanding of the value that analytics can generate, the opportunities that analytics can generate, so that you can then apply that in terms of hiring the right people for driving analytics in your role. So I would say more a leadership, an understanding of analytics at a leadership level. Right. Sharmishta says, I'm a supply chain analyst using SAS and R, very limited knowledge of predictive modeling. I want to be in supply chain. Can you suggest learning path of course? Absolutely. Since you're already using SAS and R, a lot of the base groundwork has been done. You should look at courses that offer, analytics in the supply chain domain, right? So how do companies use analytics and predictive modeling within the supply chain domain? So for that, obviously, you have to learn some amount of statistics and algorithms. And then you also have to understand common how companies in supply chain commonly use these predictive models or machine learning algorithms to solve supply chain problems. So you should look for a supply chain analytics course. You already have SAS and R knowledge, so it will be a much easier start for you, right? So for example, we do offer a supply chain analytics course, and if you're interested, we can send you the details. Varsha Kulkarni says, I'm in academics. I need to set up a data analytics lab for my students for the big data projects. What are the requirements to set up the lab? See, setting up a lab these days is fairly straightforward, but you will need somebody who has big data knowledge across the ecosystem. So when we say big data, there are multiple tools and multiple technologies that are used. So you need somebody who has that knowledge to be able to set the lab up. You need somebody who needs to understand how much processing power you require, how much does it need to scale, what's the data sets that you're going to use, what size, etc. So you will need at least one person who has strong big data expertise and Hadoop administration development experience, right? At least one person. Rajesh M says, I see most companies looking for PhD scholars for data scientist role. Can we aim for it with a postgraduate degree in physics and having 10 plus years of experience from manual testing? See, many data science roles do require PhDs, etc. But the number of those people are really limited. You need PhDs for people who will design solutions, right? But for implementation, for applying similar algorithms that companies have been using for a long time, for generating small extensions to data that has already been analyzed, you don't really need PhDs. Now, you have a degree in physics, which is good because that means your quantitative skills are strong. But given your 10 years experience in manual testing, I would recommend looking at moving into analytics via the IT route. So, look at first building skill sets on big data processing or big data especially. And then once you make a move into the data side through big data, then you want to start looking at, okay, now can I add analytics to that by maybe looking at things like Spark, for example. But right away, for you to look at 10 years of experience from manual testing into, let's say, a data scientist or a business analyst role is very hard because you don't have that domain experience and your primary experience has been more on the IT side. So I would recommend start with big data. build a skill set in big data because that's a little bit more IT oriented, and then slowly add analytics on top of that. Okay. Gulam Khan says, I'm application programmer, have good knowledge of SQL and data warehousing experience. Which role should I opt for? If you already have a good knowledge of SQL and data warehousing experience, you can actually do both. You can try big data because there's a lot of database, data warehousing, database, and sort of processing, etc. A lot of SQL is also used, but also NoSQL databases, and that skill set is very useful. But you could also look at data science, where then you want to look at understanding statistics, understanding maths, and building some experience on the business side. But given the fact that you have SQL and data warehousing experience, you can actually opt for both sets of roles. My sense is that it will be easier for you on the big data side. It will be slightly more difficult in terms of learning on the data science side, because there is a lot of statistics knowledge that you will have to add. Usha says, I finished my MCA 2010, but I've never really worked. I know Java very well. I want to start a career in analytics. So Usha, I would recommend, given Java knowledge and that you have done an MCA, again, I would recommend you want to look at a combination of some big data skills, some big data skills, maybe Hadoop MapReduce, and some of the, the processing skills, and some knowledge of R, because you will be treated as a fresher. The expectation is that you should have a wide variety of tool knowledge, because companies won't expect you to have domain knowledge, for example. But then you want to make sure that you have enough breadth of tool knowledge to understand data processing and data analysis from multiple angles. So some amount of big data processing, some amount of regular data analysis using R, using Tableau, those is what I would recommend for you. Gulam says 5 years experience in banking and credit cards. Yeah, so again, if you have domain experience in banking, credit cards, then I would recommend look at roles where you can apply the domain experience. So you should ideally target companies that are in financial services, in banking, credit cards, that are looking for people with domain experience and some data analysis skills. Rajesh says, will companies consider my 10 years of experience if I want to change my career to analytics? See, you have to be realistic about how you want to move your career, right? If you have experience in a completely non-related field, and if it is more than 4 or 5 years, right, then it's going to be very hard for you to make a 100% switch, right? What you should try and do is figure out, how do I leverage my past experience so that it is not completely lost, right? Because and I get this question from many students, right? A lot of students tell me, I'm willing to start as a fresher. But it is not so much about you willing to start as a fresher as much as will a company be willing to consider you a fresher. And most of the time it is no. They will look at prior experience and they will say, here's somebody with 10 years of experience, I can't start him as a fresher, right? So I think it's about having a longer term plan and figuring out, how do I leverage my past experience. So if your past experience has been, for example, in IT, then try and look at analytics, but come from the big data side, because that technology knowledge there is much more important, say, than domain knowledge. If your past experience has been on the functional side, marketing or sales or finance, whatever, then try and look at coming at it from a business analyst or a data analyst side, where domain knowledge is very important. So you're applying to only companies in the marketing space, or you're applying to roles that are within marketing, because it's very hard in India to make 100% switches, especially if you have substantial experience. And if you have more than 10-15 years of experience, remember that analytics is going to be another additional skill on top of your substantial experience. It will not have the ability to transform all your past experience, right? So you have to figure out, how do I add analytics as a leadership skill given my 15 years or 20 years of experience, right? Manoj Kumar says, I have 7 years of experience in IT. My background is ETL big data tester. I have SQL. I have domain knowledge. Which role will be more suitable for me? So since you are in ETL big data, I would recommend picking up more skills in big data and possibly eventually looking at Spark. Spark is essentially the way that you can implement machine learning algorithms on big data systems. So I would recommend looking at analytics from the big data route, but you learn more about other big data tools and techniques, and then eventually think about Spark. Vijay Kumar says, how is analytics industry in India shaping up? It's growing, and it's tremendously growing. At the beginning of the presentation, I did talk about why there is just so much interest and growth in analytics. Why is everybody talking about it? And there are very fundamental, solid reasons for this interest, right? We are living in a data-driven world, and the data that we are generating, the data that we are capturing, the data that we are processing is only going to increase. And so increasingly, companies need more and more people with data skills. And remember, I told you that there is not one role in analytics, and everybody doesn't need the same level of analytics knowledge. But whether you're in an analytics-oriented role, you know, where you are doing analytics day in and day out, or you are in a management role as you grow, right? More and more you have to start dealing with data and use data for decision making, right? So even if you're not in a completely analytics role, you still need better understanding of data, better understanding of data analysis, better grasp of data analytics skills, because even as a management person, you will still need to start using data for driving decisions. Okay, Ram says, I'm a BTech MBA, have 7 years of marketing experience, marketing and sales experience, 3 years into my own business, want to get into the industry with a career change in analytics. See, my recommendation strongly to you is focus on analytics, but in the marketing and sales side, because, you know, as part of your own business, you know, obviously you would have spent some time doing both marketing and sales. So there is a continuous story that you have marketing and sales domain experience, which is quite significant. And then you are also, you know, your entrepreneurship, you know, experience also then counts towards marketing and sales. And then you try and look for roles where analytics is used on marketing and sales data. You know, a lot of companies are hiring people with marketing analytics, you know, who have marketing analytics understanding. So my recommendation is to focus on analytics, but on marketing and sales data. What approach should a C Java programmer follow to become a data scientist? So clearly you have programming ability. You will need to learn some analytics tools, so SAS, R, Python, etc. You will definitely need to pick up a lot of statistics knowledge, because that is the basis for a lot of these algorithms. So you need to understand how machine learning and predictive algorithms work, and in order to do that, you will have to pick up some statistics. So those two will be sufficient to start, but over time you will have to also build domain knowledge. You need to choose what sort of a domain you would like to go for. If you don't really have one domain experience now, that's okay, but over time you will have to also build domain experience. But at the very minimum, you need tool knowledge in analytics, specifically to tools, and you will need you know, math stats knowledge. Manish Garg says, I want to do a 1-year program certification in business analytics. Which college or institute is good to have course on business analytics? Now, the good news of all this interest in analytics is that we have many choices, right? You know, 5 years ago, it was a very, very different, it was a different landscape. For example, when we started Jigsaw, there was really no analytics course. There were a lot of tool courses, there were SAS courses, there were R courses, but there were no analytics courses. But the situation has completely changed. There are a lot of options. There are a lot of really good options. It depends on many things. It depends on whether you want a full-time course or you want to do something, you know, that is part-time so you can continue working. It depends on what your end outcome with that course is, how important is the certification for you, you know, what is the focus area. So that's a very general question, but there are many, many good courses. You know, if you want to do some research and come back to us with a couple of options, and I can definitely recommend. But there are some very, very good courses. I think it's a question of location. It's a question of full-time versus part-time, you know, and also finally the end outcome of the course. If you want to do a 1-year program in business analytics, make sure that you're choosing a program that has breadth and depth, right? Many times, you know, programs have either depth or breadth, but not both. You want to make sure that there is enough breadth, but also enough depth. Taral says, working in data warehousing from the last 1.5 years, should I go for a master's degree from abroad or should I continue with job to learn for career growth? I mean, again, it depends on what your long-term interest is, right? You can try doing a master's degree, but I'm assuming that master's degree will be in analytics, or is it something else? You know, if it is analytics, you know, a lot of universities in the US have become very choosy about analytics applications because there is a lot of interest. So typically, they prefer people who have some related experience. If not in analytics, then data mining or business intelligence or something like that. So if you want to apply for an analytics program, you can, but I would recommend getting some experience in it first or something in a related field. Right? Job portals for analytics in India, there are again quite a few job portals. If you go to LinkedIn, there are a lot of groups where jobs are posted. There are analytics jobs portals, again specific. So if any job portal you go to, they have analytics jobs themselves, and then there are some specific job portals as well for analytics jobs. There are lots of them. Amar says, which course can help understanding analytics from a leader's perspective? So you want something that is not focused on building hands-on models, but is more focused on giving you an understanding of what is analytics and how it can be useful. So something that focuses on analytics from a leadership perspective. We definitely have a course called Analytics for Leaders, but you know, there may be other courses as well. So the idea is not to go into the hands-on necessarily, but to understand analytics from a strategic perspective. What is the value it can add? Okay. Jason says, where to find free projects for analytics? One good source is Kaggle. Kaggle is a a source for a lot of data science competitions. So there are lots of data sets available. Typically, they do more machine learning type computations than predictive models. A lot of the data sets will not have metadata, so you will not know what the attributes are, etc. But it's also it's a good source, and it's a globally recognized source. A lot of companies hire people now who can show that their Kaggle rank is so and so based on the data science competitions that they participate in. Himanshu says, I've done BTech MBA, pursuing CFA, have 8 years experience in finance. Which all courses should I choose for switching my career towards analytics and visualization? Since you have 8 years experience in finance, please choose a course that talks specifically about analytics in the financial services industry. Because for you now with finance experience, it's very hard to suddenly make a switch into, say, marketing analytics, right? So you want to look at a course that offers you a specialization of analytics within the financial services industry, so that it becomes very easy for you to leverage your past finance experience. Puneet says, I'm handling performance management system of my company. How can I use data analytics? So great question. HR was one field, HR, performance management, etc. was one field where, people used to be really not thinking that analytics is a big, application. But again, the data that is being captured in terms of performance management systems, in terms of employees, a lot more data is being captured, and there are companies that are very, very large, so there is suddenly a lot of data. And so there's a lot of analytics being done on, employee related, performance related data. So, if you look at courses that deal with analytics from HR, right, analytics related to HR data, you will see how analytics is applied in performance management, right? The ability to predict, who is going to be a star performer, the ability to predict, who you should be nominating for training programs because you anticipate that, their performance is much better than, or going to be much better than other people. So that's very standard applications of performance analytics, right? It's a fairly large field. And many companies like Accenture, for example, has a huge practice that is focused on HR analytics, right? Many companies that have Mindtree Analytics, many other companies offer HR analytics services now, or companies that, that are looking at leveraging their performance management data to, to sort of really manage and nurture and identify their, good performers, and to make sure that they're on the right path. Right? Manoj, I think I've answered your question. Alankrita says, out of Excel, SAS, R, SPSS, Python, which tool is most sought after a career change? I'm currently a business analyst at IT, wishing to move into a data analyst, data scientist role. So again, these things keep changing. SAS is something that has been very popular, it's been around for a very long time. If you go to any job site and look for analytics jobs, you will find that most jobs will specify SAS. But R is becoming much more popular. It is open source, so there is no cost involved. It's also very easy to connect to big data systems, which are also open source. So increasingly, I think there is a lot more popularity of R over SAS. Python is something that, again, people are extensively using, especially for implementation of machine learning. So it's not that you can pick one and say, I'm going to build my career around this. Definitely you can't learn all at the same time, but I would recommend learn at least two instead of one. Try and make sure that it is Python plus R or SAS plus R, etc. Those will be beneficial. But over time, we are moving towards more and more open source. So I think, R, Python, there will be more growth in the future. Okay, data science versus business analytics, is there a difference? So again, data science and business analytics, like I said, data science, there is emphasis on domain knowledge, programming, and statistics. I think business analytics, it's a little less on programming, more on domain knowledge and statistics. I'm just trying to make sure that I am answering everybody's questions. If I've missed anybody's question, just please retype it and I'll be happy to answer. High versus big, which to use? I mean, so these are very tactical questions. So I'm not going to answer that question. It's a very tactical question. Depends on many factors. Career path for an academician. Again, even in academics, at some point, the industry needs data scientists, and so you will have to build some data science skills as an academician for you to be able to train the next generation of data scientists. Prakash Gore says, I'm an Oracle DBA. Which field of data science is helpful for me? Since you're a database administrator, please look at coming into analytics from the big data side, because that's also a lot more of database management. It's better for you to look at big data and then start looking at analytics. Raghavendra Kumar says, I have 10 years experience in telecom without any experience in data statistics. I would recommend learning data science, doing a data science or an analytics course. But then focusing on jobs in the telecom field where you can leverage that domain experience, much better, right? So look at telecom analytics roles, which again, there are lots and lots of these roles because telecom companies deal with massive amounts of data and they're in a very, very competitive space. Okay, Shreya says BTech MBA with 7 years experience across IT, project management, managing the industrial internet program. I feel need to change my skill set so I can get into a line with more growth prospects. Yeah, I mean, maybe for you, I would recommend doing something which is a little bit more technology focused, maybe IoT. Maybe look at data science or whatever, but look at it from an IoT perspective. The Internet of Things perspective. So there, again, some amount of big data knowledge is required, some amount of data science knowledge is required, but maybe you want to start looking at IoT. Madhumita says, I've studied geology and have 5 years of experience as a geologist. Which role will suit me? There is really limited application of geology necessarily, but a lot of utility companies. So, for example, oil and gas companies may value that geology experience. And again, companies like Shell, for example, are building very strong skill sets in analytics. So, look at data science because you don't have a technology background. Look at a predictive modeling or an analytics course. But then target utility companies, oil and gas companies, where I think your past experience will become relevant. Pani says, finish BTech in electrical. I'm going through online courses. What do you think my chance in attaining a job with this preparation? Definitely very high. There are a lot of companies that are looking for people with quantitative skills. If you have an engineering background, you automatically have quantitative skills in some programming. So I think your chances are pretty good. Taral says, if masters, which country? How is Germany in terms of education and analytics and jobs? I'm not an expert on Germany. In general, the US has a lot more analytics, master's programs, job openings than say European countries. Europe is a little, less in terms of opportunity because they are not as, as advanced adopters of analytics. But certainly, I mean, I've heard of courses in Germany that are pretty good. Again, I think I can't give you a very specific answer, but definitely more opportunity in the US than say Europe. Okay, I think I've mostly answered questions. Arun says, actuarial science, risk management, MBA in finance and risk, statistics knowledge, bit of understanding of R, programming skills. So if you already have R knowledge, then I don't really think you should worry about programming skills at all. I think you have enough experience. The thing with any programming is practice. The more time you spend with it, the easier it will get. And you already have, a lot of the attributes that companies look for data science. So I would recommend don't worry about it at all. I think just spend a little bit more time with R and you should be good to go. Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay. Last question from Rajesh. Are there any pharma companies recruiting data analysts for their data? Because I have extensive knowledge in clinical trials. Absolutely. Clinical trials analytics is a huge field. A lot of companies have large teams that focus on clinical trial data and clinical trial analytics. So, there's GSK or Novartis, they have huge teams. I've personally trained many of these companies, employees on data analytics and, data analysis. Huge scope there, absolutely. Okay, so I think I've reached the end of every question. If there's anything else, if I've missed a question, then I'll wait for a couple of minutes to see if there is another question. Otherwise, I think I've reached the end of all questions. Okay, doesn't look like it. Puneet says, please guide about different HR analytics courses. So they're not different courses in HR analytics. When you're looking at HR analytics, you want to look at, employee management, performance management, training effectiveness. These are all use cases within HR analytics. So a good HR analytics course will cover all of this. It will cover, churn management or attrition prediction. It will cover performance analytics. It will cover training effectiveness, etc. So one HR analytics course that is good will cover all of this. Do defense and aerospace companies have analytics roles? Yes. Again, remember, defense companies will have multiple analytics roles depending on functional area. So aerospace companies, defense companies will have, big, operations or manufacturing or, marketing or, finance or, supply chain sort of functional areas, right? And within that, they will definitely need analytics roles. Monica says, someone who's trying to switch career paths has 8-10 years of work experience in IT. What are the different ways? So if you have 8-10 experience in IT, then please try and look at big data, because your IT experience has to count, right? It's very hard for you to say now my IT experience is not going to be relevant. So look at big data, because there is a lot more emphasis on technology programming, especially now. And then over time in big data, you can move up the value chain to talk about more doing data analytics, right? But look at big data as a stepping stone to moving into analytics. Okay. Okay, so I think I've answered most questions that were in the question tab. I've answered most questions. Manika says, what are the courses that I can learn from? So again, like I said, there are many options. At Jigsaw, we offer lots of courses. They're all online. You can look at our website and you can figure out courses that we offer. But again, depending on your preference, if you want in-person training, if you want, if you want long-term training, short-term training, there are many options. But most of the audience for analytics courses tend to be people with some work experience who tend to prefer the convenience of online training. And with online training, there are other advantages. What you should focus on is making sure that you're signing up for a course that includes a lot of hands-on work, because analytics is a very technical field. You will have to learn programming. You will have to learn how to build models. So you need to make sure that you are signing up for a course that has significant amount of hands-on. There is a lab, that you're working on business data sets, that you're working on large business data sets and not academic data sets. Okay. Again, online versus classroom, it's personal preference. Typically with classroom training, there is the additional burden of going and coming from the classroom, which a lot of professionals want to avoid. And sometimes it gets very overwhelming. With online, typically lectures get recorded. So even if you don't follow something or you miss a class, you don't have the problem, because you can just go through the recorded content and make sure that you're not missing out on anything. So we find that most of our students prefer online, but again, sometimes it is personal preference. Himanshu says data science with SAS, Excel fraud analytics. Yes. I would suggest start with data science with SAS and Excel fraud analytics and financial analytics. That's too many courses. So I would suggest start with data science and the financial analytics specialization, because that's very focused on what you need. Okay. For now, maybe not worry about neural networks, random forest, etc., because those are more advanced. And once you have a good grip on the basics, then you can start thinking about advanced. Venkatesh says, what are the programs offered by my academy? So it's on our website, jigsawacademy.com. We offer different kinds of programs. We offer short-term, comprehensive programs. We offer longer-term programs jointly with universities. So we have online training. We have in-person training through university in Bombay. We have domain-oriented training, so financial services or retail or supply chain. We have beginner level, intermediate level, advanced. We have machine learning. So I think we offer a lot of different kinds of learning. But broadly speaking, there are two tracks currently, which is a data science track and a big data track. And then within each data science and big data track, you can see the different options that we offer. I think the primary decision you first have to make is which track makes more sense for you, either based on interest or past experience. And then within that, we can help you decide what would be the appropriate courses for specific people. Fresher in analytics says, I'm a commerce student with math stat background. Will it be relevant? Absolutely. Since you have math stats background, focus on getting some tool knowledge. If you learn R and SAS and you have a math stats background, that will be a great combination for an analytics career start. Manoj says, what's your view about Microsoft Azure machine learning? It's a great product. It's a great stack. A lot of companies are showing a lot of interest in it. Microsoft bought Revolution R, so they have a really, really compelling product, and I expect a lot more companies to be using that full stack offering from Microsoft. Where does CP course by Insofi fit in the quality of the course? Again, it's a fairly intensive course. It's very long. It's a long and intensive course, so it has a lot of breadth of topic coverage. But you do need a high level of commitment to do the course, because it is very long and it is very intensive. So as a beginner course, I'm not very sure if that is appropriate. You may want to start with something shorter to sort of make sure that you're comfortable with it before you sign up for a long course like that. But clearly a lot of content is covered and it's a very rigorous course. Okay, excellent. So thank you for your patience. I hope I have answered most of your questions. If I've missed any questions, then I'm sorry. But there were lots of questions. I wanted to make sure that I was able to answer most of them. If there are other questions that you have, feel free to write to us. If you write to info@jigsawacademy.com and just use my name, Sarita, I'll be happy to answer any other questions that you have, anything specific related to your career or courses that you should look at or options that you have. I'm happy to answer. So I'm going to mute my speaker now, and I will hand it over to AIM. Okay. I hope most of you found this useful. Like I said, if you have other questions, feel free to write to us, and I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Sarita, for sharing your valuable insights in this webinar. I hope the participants found it informative as well. I would request that participants do subscribe to Analytics India magazine to stay updated on the analytics industry in India. And if you have any suggestions or queries, please feel free to write to us on info@analyticsindiamag.com. Thank you again for participating in this webinar.